Okay, so we've started. All right, so Paul's on the phone with me this morning. It's Sunday, that's the date, 22nd, 23rd, something like that. 26th, wow. And Paul and I have worked together now I've known Paul probably for about 2 years.
Actually, 3.
3. So time flies. Not only having fun, but just time flies. Time flies it's always fast when it's past. Can seem forever when it isn't, and those are just, again, perceptive variations. But Paul went back home for a while. He had a grandmother die to Hungary and is back now and is having an experience that I wanted everyone out there to hear that's listening, because it is emblematic not only of my process, but any process of facing how things actually are and starting to grow with a level of willingness and a level of interest that actually begins to acknowledge the dread and the fret and the fear and the debate going on, this mental debate that's absolutely exhausting, takes more energy in our body than our body is capable of taking beyond that. Because if you ever notice working out, when you get to a point where you feel like you can't go on, it's your brain telling you can't go on. It's not your muscles. It's your brain making that decision. And a lot of times why there's so much positive thinking in athletics and all that, it's pushing past those limits that we seem to have imposed on us. So the brain takes an enormous amount of energy out of our body when we are internally debating mentally. So talk to me, Paul.
Good morning.
Or us.
Or good afternoon. Somewhere in Europe, actually, where I grew up. I think we last talked about I'm still having difficulties. I've been in recovery, coming up in 3 years, and I still have difficulties to talk honestly what is really going on. And it's not because I just don't know how to express them, and I don't know what to do with them, and it's in here, and I don't know how to share it.
But even in doing what you just said, that's doing exactly what you're saying you're not doing.
And I'm doing it later, but I should do it.
No, right now you're doing it by simply saying, I just don't have the words. If I am talking about something, if you are talking about something that you've never talked about, there's a good chance you haven't had words for it. Why would you have words? You haven't done it.
Yeah, and on extra, I'm from Hungary originally, so I even have to sometimes translate it, but I think in Hungarian I know.
Well, and part of the point, Paul, is that we've been trying to take credit so long for something that isn't true, like make-believe is being reality. How we think of things is becoming what those things are. We've been trying to do that for a long time through human history, as far as I can tell, because the viciousness of human history is an outcropping of the frustration of that kind of thinking. The absolute loathing, hateful internal experience we're creating ends up being magnified because it would be insane to admit that we're doing that. But in fact, it's sane to admit that we're doing that. That's the insanity about insanity. It has us make believe that if we stop doing what we're doing, we're going to die while the thing we're doing is continuing to kill us. So the point I'm making to you is that while you're saying you don't know how to put words to it, saying you don't know how to put words to it is actually saying exactly what you're experiencing, isn't it? It's honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's honest. So I want you to take credit because that's credible. It's credible. And you don't, if you're bankrupt in your thinking, you can't get any credit. Like anybody who's in bankruptcy, they don't say, oh, please, let me loan you more money. But if you notice the things you can take credit for, you'll start noticing how quickly you've been dismissing those things in the name of making believe that those things that are incredible, that don't have any credit, that are actually debts, are going to someday become true if you keep thinking about them harder. That's the insanity of the obsessive thought. So I'm giving you credit because you've earned it. If you notice it, you're actually earning it. You start seeing the things you're saying is a little more clearly than trying to reinforce the things you're not actually saying.
Yeah, and maybe I wasn't. I just yeah. I often heard that I have to go deeper, and like I often pretend that I don't know what does that mean, or maybe I just don't want to go there.
But you know why?
Uh, why?
Deeper is a grave. If we're digging a hole, that's why we want to go deeper. Why are we digging a hole? Because we've been digging a hole and thinking that more and more and more of that thinking is going to finally get us somewhere. But we're digging a hole. Why would we dig a hole and want to be deeper? The deeper you get, the less chance you have of getting out of it. Again, it's completely reversed. It isn't. Truth and reality are not deep. They're absolutely available and accessible everywhere we are. They are the essence of our existence, not some optional, occasional thing that comes and goes. The thinking we do is optional and occasional and comes and goes. We think that how we think about things is how things are. Not true. How we think about things is how we think of them. So I'm pinpointing these things not to play with your words, but to mention that your words are revealing your thoughts. And that if you think you need to go deeper, you think there's something at the bottom of that hole to get to, and I guarantee you there is, but it's a grave. It's lonely, it's deep and away from all that's happening. Probably not the goal you're after. I strive for superficiality.
All right. So then I asked this because I always love finding out. It's just like I know myself, and I mean I might not, but I love finding out more and more about like I have so much just because now we are there. I have so much. Uh, it's really blurry how I grew up and what happened.
Mhm.
And I just love finding out. And um, it does it matter? And you're saying it um, what is there? It's more sadness and yeah, that's definitely true. On my perspective, whatever happened to me in my childhood, and what happened, it's like I love finding it out. I love getting to know more, and
Well,
it's some.
I think what we talked about in relation to that is it's what you're thinking about that childhood that isn't happening anymore now. It's what you're thinking now about it that you're struggling with.
Yeah, and then still like have motives and like related to those behaviors like when formed that time,
Yes.
um, because I was judged or criticized or I didn't get the approval. Like we talked about last conversation, like the approval part, like and I learned and I actually started. I found out that through appearance, I mean, that was also my career, or became my career because I knew that through appearance, I can, I mean, probably superficial, but through appearance, I can get your approval. I can hear what I want to hear from you because my parents, I didn't hear from my parents or I didn't get from my parents. And
You can manipulate them.
what was it?
You can manipulate them.
Yeah.
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 And
So,
once I found that out, all my motives became around that, and I wanted to be the best of the best. You know,
but you notice that that was about them, right?
it's not. Yeah,
You thought your job was controlling their thinking while you were denying the impact you were having by the thinking you were doing about what they were thinking. Follow that?
yeah.
Now, that's not unusual when you're kids. Being immature as a child is natural. They're not matured. Being immature as an adult is not natural.
I made a decision. I wanted to grow. I wanted to grow up.
Well,
um,
my sense is those ideas of growing come with thinking the more we manipulate and the more we desensitize our own experience by relying on this is the beginning of codependency. My job is to make other people think that I'm okay. I used to think that I was being honest if people didn't catch me. Think about that. I had a complete investment in what they thought. Well, I knew what I was thinking was wrong, but I tried to deny it by making believe it was just what they thought that my focus should be. So you can see how that flips immediately. Nothing bothering your parents right now is bothering you.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's the same. Like it's the same also when if I still have any resentment towards them or any like I'm still taking things personal. Like, all right, um, what's the right word?
But you still think there's a person to take them.
Exactly. And she just wants to like she just wants to know me and wants to love me. She doesn't hold anything towards me other than me.
No, I would almost guarantee you she has some thoughts that are conflicted.
Oh yeah,
We,
she might
we,
probably.
we all probably do. Yeah. I mean, if we're looking accurately, we're going to see wrong is just part of something we're doing, not an indictment against our whole being and our whole thing that we have to hide and pretend we're not doing. And then think of others in that way where they're just ultimately, if love is love and it's absolute, that's the natural state of existence. That's what we all have and share. That's natural. But we're not struggling with that. We're struggling with the human ideas we have about that, and the human ideas we have about each other, and the human ideas we have about our own thinking in relation to reality and life and truth. That's what we're struggling with. We're
You
the
know,
only species on Earth who has the capacity to think about our thinking, to think about each other, to think about life that isn't just based in instinct like animals. Animals don't go around and get upset with people, and they don't kill themselves or die of anxiety unless they're actually under stress from a problem that's constantly confronting them.
yeah, I don't know, like if it's last time or not, but it's thinky talk you mentioned. We were talking about, or maybe I just heard something about love, and I think we talked about it this like many times, but I think I totally misunderstand what was love is and what love is. Even nowadays, I still don't know probably really. Um, and I think I looked up the word what love is, and you had like I had a totally different definition. What I just misunderstood. Um,
As we talked about, by the way, before we got on today, my
um,
experience has been that what we're really misunderstanding is what absolute, infinite, unlimited, omnipotent, omniscient, all powerful, all knowing means.
I mean that God is no.
Well, if there is a God that can be identified beyond that or individually, it would be limited to that. If you follow that, if I think of God as being what I think, then I'm pretending that God isn't infinite and isn't unlimited and isn't omnipotent and isn't omniscient, and yet I'm saying God has all power, and yet I'm making believe that I still have power. I do have power to think. I do have control to choose. Those are things that I have. It doesn't mean what I choose and think eliminates, changes, or undermines that absolute state of being. And within the context of Alcoholics Anonymous, Dr. Bob, Bill's co partner in the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, said that all of the steps are love and service. And there is probably no greater service than love because is it always giving, always supportive, always helpful, always able, always, not sometimes. The love we think about is sometimes here and sometimes not, and sometimes good and sometimes bad. That isn't love, that's like. We've mistaken like for love. We've mistaken our thinking for reality. We've mistaken our expectations for things we have to get, when in fact they're just hopes, wishes.
Yeah, I looked up the word powerless, um,
It doesn't mean
and
less power.
Yeah,
None,
it's,
zero.
it's just like, and I'm not sure if I fully understand still the steps, because I think there is a different levels of understanding them, because it's really personal for me. Um, like it says, lacking in strength, power, authority. Um,
Give me that again. Read that again.
Lacking in
Mhm.
strength, power, or authority.
So think about that. Lacking.
No, it's really true.
Let's look up lack really quick because wondering if that definition doesn't still leave some room. I mean, to lack something, I would think would be without it, not having it whatsoever. Yeah, an absence or inadequate. Well, see, it's powerless means doesn't mean less power. It means no power. Like worthless means no worth. But they're saying in the definition an absence or inadequate amount of something. So within the context of the first step, the thing we
Admitting.
have, well, we're admitting that we have no power, but we're admitting it's over alcohol. But in fact, it's over the thought we have that we can control and enjoy the alcohol. That's what we're admitting. We're looking at it as a principle. We're not looking at it as a symptom. We're looking at it as the cause of that symptom. So powerless in that regard means no power whatsoever. Why? Because there is no power in a lie. We can think there is, and we can imagine there is, and we can think that our manipulations and that influence we have to manipulate and connive and steal and threaten and coerce and all that other kind of stuff is real power, but it isn't. It's just manipulation. It's an ability we have to affect things. It doesn't create reality. It is like miscreant behavior, bad behavior in relation to reality, to use those things as though they're reality, which we do. Reality, if it's love, doesn't include those things. Those are all only made up in thoughts, only made up in the brains of humans, only made up to serve the idea that we're not responsible for what we're doing, that there is no absolute nature. So I need to be absolutely convinced that all I am is what I think. Because to think of the absolute as not absolute is to think there is no absolute. And to think that in a universe that is absolute, even though I would suggest the universe, if you look at it, it's always expanding. That doesn't mean that it's absolute right now until you look at what it's expanding into as being part of the absolute. It isn't apart from it. The limits of that expansion would suggest that it's limited. But if it's actually, if there's something for it to move into, that means that there's something we're not even thinking about in relation to that expansion. To make believe that all the universe is what it is today, and what it is now is bigger than it just was. It's not really bigger when you start including, it's like a ball. If you thought the universe was a ball, you would not play with the ball, you would not use the ball, you would think you were in the ball. And to think we are in our thoughts is why we think we're stuck in thinking. And that thinking is attacking us. It's attacking us because we're stuck with it. We can't get away from it. So we're in this hell, this actual hell, this bubble of a hell of thought that we've created, and think there's nothing else but that. So we have to fight for it, defend it. That's the weakness of the idea. That's a lack of power, trying to act like power. It's a lack of it's vulnerability trying to act invulnerable. Weakness
It
trying
says
to. Hmm?
it says on the big book, and like the lack of power was our dilemma, but not even that. But we our last like phone conversation, we thought like a couple of days ago, we were really talking about step one here, or even step zero, how to get in step one, like that, like how to get there, and I asked you like when you actually like were when you really were getting sober, how it was, and you said like you had fully conceded to our inner to yourself that you were an alcoholic, and I think that fully concede it's not about just the alcohol, but like to actually like to that have this mental insanity. Actually, I mean that's
What
like a
I
bigger.
actually said, though, Paul, was that I didn't fully concede. That what I said was, if, remember I said that I learned that about the word might and may, might became
Oh
mighty,
yeah,
because
no,
all I thought, the only thought I had that day was, if what they're saying is right, true, what I'm hearing in Alcoholics Anonymous, and if I have that problem. So when you were talking about identification, I was identifying a disease and I was identifying I might have it. And all I said was if. But it was the most honest, just like you talking earlier about your thoughts, not knowing the words and actually being honest about that. And that actually being something credit worthy rather than something that dismisses your ability to have the words. You're actually using the words to actually deny the words you're using in that sense. But in the way that it occurred to me that day, all I said was, if I have this problem,
that is right.
right? And
Yeah,
and and I knew what the problem was because I'd heard them say it hundreds of times in the years that led up to that. And if I have it, it's probably worth talking about. It's worth saying something about. That's what I thought. And I called somebody immediately that immediately cemented and confirmed and reinforced the fact that I was on a path that was worthy and useful and whole. I knew that day, and I was high that day. I'd still smoked pot that day, but I knew that it was the last day, and I knew that I would get sober. I knew that I would get a year, which I'd never gotten in 6 years of going to meetings. So the difference in the clarity for me as I looked at it was I didn't have to admit it to my absolute innermost self. I was admitting it on the surface sufficiently to simply warrant that I was considering something to be possible that I had considered in the past to be absolutely impossible. I was starting to see it accurately rather than continuing to maintain the lie inaccurately. So, in
yeah,
relation to that, with you and thinking, and for anyone listening, to talk about this is probably the most primary thing we can do to confirm the thinking we're doing that's wrong and also start to wade through whatever it is that we've built on a premise of thought that we've been relying on for so long, to begin to dismantle that, to take it off the mantle, to begin to literally let it evaporate and dissolve rather than constantly try to resolve it by feeling better about what's wrong.
yeah. I mean, I didn't even know what really alcoholics means, and like it's totally different today what it means for me. Like those thoughts.
Mhm.
Like and I still have like a fresh, really fresh experience. Like I have problem with food, and um, I had problem with that. I mean, like probably or like possibly if I picked up, because I just didn't care, or maybe I do care, but I'm just an alcoholic with food, and I'm just
It's the thinking that
yeah.
precedes all the compulsive behaviors. And
This is the first bite. Exactly.
I would
Uh,
suggest that that thinking, Paul, as long as it's going on, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be going on, I'm suggesting that as long as it's going on, because the difference with alcohol and drugs and gambling and that kind of addiction is that the recovery is abstinence, complete abstinence. Recovery from thinking is not complete abstinence any more than it is from food. We're not asked to no longer eat anymore. We're not asked to no longer think. It's starting to see that the capacity we have to eat poorly, to eat more than we need, to eat things that don't serve us nutritionally is a choice. What we're really regaining is the neutrality of choice, realizing that once we see truth, here again, if we're not seeing principles in the absolute honestly, we're not seeing choice honestly, because choice always allows not to be chosen. That's the whole principle of choice. I can choose or not choose. When I'm in addiction, I think I can't choose. I think it's the only thing I can do. That's a mental problem created by a conflict over a lie. And I don't need to know what the thought is to know that I'm doing it, because we don't see our thinking, but we certainly know the effects of the thinking we're doing very clearly.
Yeah,
We feel disturbed, upset, angry, hostile, lonely, anxious, struggling, interconflicted, emotional turmoil, mental anger, all of it. It's all telling us that the sum total of our thinking, without thinking about any thought individually, the entirety of our mentality is telling us we're up to something within it that isn't right. Period. Simple.
and my thinking saying like, no, 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 this is the food.
Of course. Well, no, but this is your choice to continue to think obsessively, which is to continue to make believe that one half, if the relative experience we're having is relative, it means that everything has an opposite relation. So right has wrong, good has bad, left has right, up has down. And that's true in everything. Everything we have has an opposite, but also has everything beyond that opposite and everything between that opposite. There's shades of right and wrong. There's shades of like and don't like. There's shades of want and not want, right? There's variations of those things. But when I take a position that it's only one thing, I am also simultaneously taking, because I'm in a relationship with everything, I'm taking a simultaneous position against everything else. And it's unsustainable. And the agony of that, the misery of that, the mental conflict of that is exhausting. And we know it because we say we're sick and tired, yet are not tired enough to not continue to do it. We're sick, we've admitted, but we're not tired enough if we keep doing it.
Yeah.
Kind of the big oy vey.
What was it?
It's the big oy vey, like in Yiddish, just like, oh, oy vey. What can I do? It's kind of a huge giving up and starting to see. If I'm looking accurately at things, I'm seeing things accurately. If I'm looking inaccurately and think I'm seeing them accurately, I'm creating the confusion and the conflict that I'm thinking about. And then thinking about other things is going to contain that conflict. So I will then blame those other things for causing that conflict simply because I'm not willing to admit my own sick thoughts.
I have problem like looking everything like pretty much accurately.
Well, that's a very good observation. Because if the basis of your thinking about thinking and about reality and about truth and about life is corrupt, of course everything's going to be colored by that paintbrush, by that lens, all of it. It's been going on as long as recorded history has shown self-indignation righteousness to actually justify killing other people, and including our seeming self, including our own body.
Just saying like, I was wrong. I had like really difficult times to saying that. Like, before coming into like recovery, for sure, I was like, I was blaming everything else around me.
So part of the recovery, Paul, is also starting to see that you're so used to actually feeling wrong that you're going to start applying what seems wrong to things that are actually right. You've had it backwards so long. When you actually start looking at this, you'll start seeing, like you said earlier, I don't have the words for this, and didn't notice that by saying that you were actually being accurate about your experience. So we've been feeling wrong so long, we think now honesty is blaming things that aren't to blame, and that other things that are wrong when they're actually right. We're actually getting honest and we're actually seeing things now untwisted, but we're actually still so used to habitually using this idea that if I admit it's wrong, I'm better. But in certain cases, we're actually admitting something we're doing honestly and right is wrong. And it just continues to perpetuate the thing, because that's how easy it is to complicate something that's absolutely perfectly simple.
Yeah, I mean, like we just found out that like I mean, this is the right word. I was just, I didn't know what dishonesty means, and I didn't know what honesty like means or meant. I'm learning about it. Um, it's we just found out last time that I still like I'm still like dishonest for a lot of things, and because this is what I learned, and like to protect myself or whatever it is.
Forget
But
about the reason. Simply think about the fact. To think about it as a reason, as something you learned at some time that's no longer happening, is to forget that you're doing it now.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if you say, I still lie, I'm still dishonest, I'm still dishonest, I don't know how to put words so perfectly in order that I can convey exactly what I'm thinking all the time. So I generally need to rework it and re-say it and redefine it and be in a constant flow of that changing thinking that I do. It's not something I'm trying to get down so I can say, well, I'm just going to repeat this sentence anytime I want to adjust, because whatever the feelings are a new mix of feelings. There's a new mix of thoughts. There's a new mix of circumstance. There's a new mix of everything all the time.
Yeah. It's and talking about the emotions and then the feelings. I don't know how to express them, so I still go back to the old ways.
Well,
That's was just a fresh, really fresh memory for me.
it's like
Um,
it's like anybody in a sport. Learning to change something that you've done the whole time is it takes time. It takes a minute. It doesn't always happen immediately. But you'll also notice some things will happen immediately. And as a result, you won't even notice they've happened. It'll be months before you go, I don't even think that thing anymore. I used to think that all the time, and I don't even remember thinking it, because they'll vanish and disappear. The fact is, none of this stuff that we're struggling with is actually reality. It's simply a delusion about an illusion being thought of as reality, because we've developed this narrative about it that's so thick and so convincing that we think the imaginary plot twist that we've created in the circumstances we're facing with other people actually confirm the story we're developing.
yeah. Um,
So you're a great writer, great screenwriter.
yeah, like, and I've been here like many times, probably from a different experience,
You've been there all the
but
time.
yeah, but like nobody pressured me to pick up the first bite or like have a first drink last time.
Very
Nobody,
good. Good, very good.
nobody.
Yeah.
Um, Rather than I was blaming everything else around my thoughts.
Yeah. It's everything but the thing you were doing that was causing the experience was definitely to blame.
Yeah,
Think about that.
and and
It's
and
but we're actually thinking that. We're thinking that thought that everything else is to blame and not noticing that the thing we're thinking with is to blame.
yeah, exactly.
Fucking insanity.
And even now, like I'm thinking, I'm like, I don't know how it's gonna be next time. Like, I'm afraid. Because I'm kind of getting there, and I know these are challenges. Whatever happens to me, and whenever like this compulsion, this compulsive thoughts get me there, that I actually start don't care or stop care about everything and everyone in this world, all the species and everything, and just lock myself in, and I just go for it. And
So think of the compulsions as finally giving you an opportunity to notice the obsession of thinking. Those are a gift. That's how nature helps us have perspective on something that we can't see our thinking. We only see and feel the results of it. We can listen to our words, we can watch our actions, we can watch our feelings. They're all giving us ideas, thoughts about what we're thinking and how we're thinking. And what and how we're thinking doesn't make up the things we think of, it makes up the thoughts we have about those things. That's the critical difference between the idea that thinking is reality and creates reality. And you hear this all the time, that it creates reality. Reality existed way before we started thinking, way before. And it hasn't changed in the essence of it. What's changed are the forms of it, the projected forms, the variations of things in the cosmos have changed. But none of them are worried about what they're doing but us. We're the only ones that suffer the indignation to the point where we think the only thing left to do is kill our own brain and body because we can't take it anymore. Now, think about that. Think how desperate we can become within the thinking we're having, and then have that same thinking be based on we can base the further thinking we do on that same thinking and wonder why we feel hopeless and less and less and less able to do anything about it. And think that the best thing we can do is just end the life of the form that's doing the thinking. It's the same thing we think in terms of homicide. It's homicide or suicide. People have justifications that the only thing they can do is kill that person to stop the anger, the hostility, and it's all being generated in their own experience. It has nothing to do with the other person except the excuse we use to justify it, to try to escape it.
At the end of the day, it's just a different compulsion.
Exactly. Very good. All actions, compulsive actions and behaviors are expressions of obsessive thoughts. We don't see the obsessive thoughts, but we can feel them, because we know inner conflict and we know emotional turmoil and we know mental anguish. We're very clear in that. We know anxiety. We know stress. We know depression. Those are all indications, mental indications of something we're doing that is anxious, creating anxiety, creating depression, because it's a weight we're not designed to bear. We're designed to bear it to the degree that it gives us a chance to notice it. But if we don't pay attention and pretend we don't notice it, that depression is going to eventually create physical ailments that will kill the body. And nature instinctively, wherever there is something operating on a basis that is counterproductive to the survival of other organisms, goes extinct. Suicide is a form of that extinction. It's trying to put out the fire of that thinking, because that thinking affects everything and everyone else in some way. And we have been doing that as a species so long that we literally think it's our nature, when in fact it's a sick, perverted, obscene, immoral version of our nature, which is why it's a perversion. It's another version, completely concocted in thought, having no basis in reality except for the freedom that reality gives us to think whatever we want. And that freedom comes with absolute responsibility for everything we think and everything we do and everything we feel and everything we say. 100% all the time. Not just when we're awake and thinking about it, but all the time, whether we're thinking about it or not. Again, considering absolute is absolute, it begins to make sense, because the clarity of the absolute, the stillness, the peacefulness, the absolute quietness, silence, allows us to notice the disturbances, the loud, the chaotic, the voices. All of those things would not be intelligible to us, and don't seem to be when we act unintelligently about them, and act as though they're not happening simply because we can think they're not happening. Again, it shows how free we are to do what we want in our thinking.
Mm.
Are we required? No. Do we think we're required? Yes. Again, we're trying to make absolute certainty out of a lie by fighting for it and demanding people respect us and see us, and we don't have any respect or clarity in our own vision to begin with. So we're demanding it of others. We're insisting on it of others. We're trying to get somewhere, someplace with something that's going to finally get us that recognition. And yet it's only our own doubt that we're creating that is honest and accurate about what we're doing that's causing that sense of lack of fulfillment. There's nothing beyond that at all.
Yeah, I was just reading about it yesterday that there's always that illusion that once I get there, that everything's gonna be okay.
Right.
With like with everything pretty much, like it's regardless of career or relationship or this illusion, whatever it is. Once I have it, then the compulsion stops and the insanity stops.
Right. So here's what's interesting about that. We've been thinking about that way for so long that whenever we come into a new moment, it's absolutely new. Every moment is new. Every moment right now is always new. Right now, everything that's possible is possible. But since we've been planning to get to a place that doesn't exist, once we get here, we think about it being a place that doesn't exist. From that habituation of imagining someday, somehow, somewhere else with someone else and something else is going to satisfy me. Every moment we end up new with that critical thinking, and I mean critical now is criticism rather than critical in terms of precise and accurate and intelligible, but now judgment, contempt, etc. We're so preoccupied with that, we don't think the possibilities that are possible. So we think the only possibility, once again, is this diminished capacity to imagine some other place and some other time, which, by the way, doesn't even exist. There is no other place or any other time but the present. And I would suggest the present isn't even in time because it's the absolute, it's the infinitesimal distance between what we think of as the past and what we think of as the future. So the nowness isn't even, it's like the changes in algebra, the change of the curve in algebra being defined by Newton and Leibniz as these infinitesimals. The distance is incalculable. And yet, when they applied factor of the infinite into the formulas, all of a sudden those curves turn to graceful, simple movement, elegance. The same with our present state. That absolute knowingness is with us here now. And we don't obliterate it when we don't think about it. We obliterate the thinking we're doing because now we are not using that knowingness as our source. We are only thinking about the thinking about the thinking about the thinking about the thinking as our source. It's what we're thinking about we're struggling with, not the thinking we have about that knowingness. That knowingness we know. We're absolutely built on it. We're a product of it. We can think we don't know it and still know it, and we can act like we don't know it and still know it. Because it is absolute. It does not change. It does not go. It does not come. It can't be more or less. It is as it is, where we are all the time. We are a function of it, a product of it. Not in doubtful and uncertain terms, but in absolute terms.
Yeah, like if I see it, that like really similar for me, that I've been I've been running so hard in all my life, and maybe I still do. I don't know. But I started running at one point in my life, and I always create this image about myself, um, and that image about myself, it's it's definitely not now. It's not here, and as the result of that, like I'm always in the future, and not like I cannot really like be now here
But
and enjoy.
you have to imagine, and go with me on this and then tell me whether I'm accurate. You have to imagine that that image is reality because
Exactly.
the image is only occurring now, but it isn't real. It's an image, right? So as
Yeah.
soon as you think it's real, you think you're running into the future, which you can't do. That's just another concoction of thought that you're going to get somewhere else by not being where you are. And the only place you ever are, the only place you can be, the only place everything is, everything, everywhere, all the time is now, here.
It sounds insane.
It is. Bingo. Bingo.
um,
It doesn't sound it. It is. That's the whole point of insanity, is it has no basis in existence. It's completely manufactured in thought. Our self is completely manufactured in thought that we're thinking about. That isn't who we are. It's a thought we have about who we are. And then a collection of thoughts, and then a collection of stories and narratives and imagery that's literally a play, like a Shakespearean play with all the drama and all the comedy, and it's not that funny when we take it seriously and think it's who we are.
no, but yeah,
So that
it's.
thought, when you think that image, Paul, is real, you think that image is you. And that's why you think you run from it. You don't run from it. Your thoughts run on and on and on and on and on with the imagery now that they're trying to turn into, you're trying to have them turn it into reality by thinking about it constantly. And all of a sudden thinking that because you're thinking about that sickness constantly, that you are sick and there is nothing else you can do. None of it's true. But like being in a dream, it can feel like it. The difference is when we're awake doing it, it's a little different to figure out that we're awake than after we've been sleeping and wake up and say, oh, it was only a dream. When we wake up from sleep, we go, oh, yeah, it was a dream. But we felt like we were in it when we were asleep, right?
I just had that exactly like this just when I get up today.
Yeah.
I had it um, with something that I was I felt like I'm stuck in the dream, or like I wasn't able to differentiate that this is actual reality, or like and that was something about relapse and not telling the truth.
But how coincidental. But listen, your
uh,
your interest in this and your participation in this confirm each other. Your participation confirms your interest, and your interest confirms your participation. And something I want to do in these conversations is to remind anyone listening, we know you're out there. We've been listened to in over 1,000 cities. Over half the countries in the world have listened to this conversation. This is not a polished conversation. It isn't edited. We are not trying to add music to it or have it seem anything more adventurous than a simple conversation to individuals who may or may not be struggling with mental conditions. And I'm talking about induced mental conditions, not brain trauma that's occurred from accidents or genetics or any of that other kind of stuff. If there's nothing you can do about it, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something induced within the context of our thinking about our thinking that is wrong. That's it. Simple. And yet, I would say that this has been pervasive through all of human history, all of the empires that have risen and fallen, all of the people that thought they were in charge of those empires, that thought that they were God, that thought that they had some magnificent reason to justify oppressing other people, suppressing other people, and killing other people for what they thought. It is no different than what we're doing in our own experience, each of us. And to come to terms with this is to start to see that the only salvation we have is the actual redemption we get by starting to claim responsibility for what we're doing, each of us and every one of us, in our own experience. And I'm not talking about salvation in religious terms. I'm not talking about redemption in religious terms. I'm talking about actually redeeming the coupon that we have to live fully, to think thoughtfully, to express love, to be naturally abundant in our actions rather than depreciate our thinking, depreciate our abilities, depreciate our relationships, depreciate life, depreciate everything in the name of making believe the more we can control it, the better off we'll be. If you can talk about that with anybody, you will see shift in your awareness of your ability and disabilities to discuss it, just as Paul mentioned. He doesn't have the words. I don't always have the words. I come up against ideas and concepts that I've never thought of and that take me a minute. I sit and I write and I try to put some shape to them so I can talk about them and see if through that conversation there is another level of awareness that other people may or may not have, to offer some perspective rather than cause all the problems we cause to create the perspective. Talk about it in some potentially gainful way that might offer insight to what we each already know. And I would suggest to you, if you're listening, you know what you know, and you are as you are. There's nothing you need to concoct that. There's nothing you need to get more or less of that. It's the absolute state of being that is your nature. It's my nature. It's all of our nature. It's the nature of nature and everything in it, period. No objections to that are actually impacting it. Only our mentality is impacted by objecting to it and objectifying it and subjecting ourselves to it and all those other ways that we can take our mentality and make believe it's the sole authority of life and reason, when it's unreasonable and illogical and completely preposterous to rely on it in those terms. So if you're doing that, we would welcome your participation, because I would love to hear what you think so that we can address it and talk about it the way Paul and I are. And also remind everyone else listening that participation, that step to participate, to actually engage, begins to confirm your interest in actually doing something about it, rather than sit alone thinking there's nothing you can do. There's absolutely plenty we can do in a world today where for $100 a year, you can get on a Zoom call with anybody in the world and talk for hours. Now it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't even take that much technology. Paul and I today are on iPhones. I don't know if you have an iPhone, but I'm recording this on an iPhone. We can do it with just about anybody, anywhere, and it will confirm the nature, not of the divisiveness that we all think of in terms of our different ethnicities and the different countries we are in and all those other kind of divisive ideas, but the absolute nature of our complete, cohesive, integrated, synchronicitous, symmetrical existence that we share. It will confirm that as we do that. And I would suggest a broader example of that would be very helpful, because it would remind everyone everywhere that they have the same capacity and the same potential, and it's their own limited thoughts about that are causing them any sense of disconnect, any sense of separation, any sense of loneliness, any sense of abandonment. It's coming directly from, nobody can impact any of our experience more than our own mentality. Nobody, anytime. What people say and do, what they demand of us, at some point we either decide to act on or internalize or deny and fight and not act on and pretend we're not internalizing them. Well, in some way there's an impact. And to become sensitive to that is to become aware of that, and to not think that hypersensitivity is overwhelming, but just start to see that any overwhelming sense is literally the limits of our thoughts being overwhelmed by ideas we have that are actually growing and starting to expand beyond that and starting to show how flexible, like yoga, our thinking is, and how brittle in all that we can make believe it is, how rigid we can make believe it is. So that's an invitation, and you're welcome to sit and do exactly what you're doing and nothing more than that. I'm suggesting from years of experience that the participation seems to trigger something that confirms for us that we're actually interested when we think there's no hope and think we don't have enough faith and belief. We've had too much faith and too much belief in things that are faithless and unbelievable, and too much hope in things that are hopeless, to make believe that somehow or another more of that kind of thinking is ever going to get us to any place that will give us a sense of cohesion and unity and a loving sense of camaraderie and benefits to one another that we can either receive or give. And the two are the same.
Well, thank you.
That wasn't particularly an ending, but if your time's
Uh,
wrong, I
um,
I want to start doing this because I want to stress that the idea of this came from working with people in very small quarters for a long time, and that people are working with people in very small quarters. And my sense is listening to them publicly gives everyone a chance to start to notice that we're absolutely sharing either we're already sharing the absolute nature of life equally, indiscriminately, immutably, inviolably, but we are also participating on a level of thinking that may appear different, but is very much the same, that's giving us other impressions about that absolute state of being, about that ever present knowingness, about that state of being that always is in the present.
Well, I'm really interested, and probably that's why I'm in the line with you, to like stop listening those.
Well, and the key isn't to stop. The key is to notice that you're the one starting it. And as you begin to notice that, that's a level of responsibility. When I think I've got to stop it, I'm avoiding again, I'm causing it. Why would I think more and more stopping would help if I'm continuing to restart it and act as though I don't have anything to do with it?
The problem is that I listen it. I actually
No, you
like
believe it.
I do, yeah.
Good. So, Paul,
and and I don't want to. Yeah,
going back, going back to
I
you for a second in that way. First of all, you want to, or you wouldn't be doing it. So
yeah.
that's something you can write down and start living with. If you start wanting what you're doing, you'll start noticing you want it, and then you'll look at it and say, "This is sick. Why would I want that? It's crazy." We keep saying we don't want it because that would be rational not to have it. But to say we don't want it while we're doing it is to create another conflict right now, right here, that since we're only ever where we always are, when we have that conflict, it seems to become insurmountable because we're maintaining it in the present over and over and over and over again. Every new moment becomes filled with that kind of thinking. So, a couple of things to think about, just to write down and apply and practice. First of all, you want what you do. We don't make choices because we don't want things. And if we don't want things, that's a choice to want not wanting things. So, either way, we want it, period. But when you think you're running, notice when you say that, you have to believe that that idea that's running on and on and on and on is you. You think the personification of who you are and the essence of who you are has become that thought to be running and running and running.
That's another insanity.
Exactly. But now just begin to notice if you apply the feelings you're having and running off into the future to the thinking you're doing, and because thinking is something we have and it isn't something we are as perfectly capable of not having it as we are having it. Why? Because it doesn't threaten our existence at all. It threatens our existence to think we can't have it, to think we have to have it. When I don't have things as they are, I think I have to have other things. Think of the redundancy of having to have something. If we already have everything, there's nothing we have to have, and everything we can choose. So, again, second thing is just notice the thoughts you're having are thoughts. And the things you're assigning to who you are, you have to make believe that those thoughts are reality to make believe that they have now become you.
Yeah, I get there so many times. Then I think I get there, and then
Right.
I actually am. I think I am, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's over.
So,
The game is over.
so if you see it's over in the moment, you see that the moment always presents the possibility to think it's not over, right?
Yeah,
We thought, say, in drinking, that everything went away when we drank, when in fact all we were doing was manipulate our feelings about everything. And what would happen? We'd wake up with the same problems, and those problems would have not gotten better while we were thinking they were better. But in this case, the real freedom comes from seeing that if we are free to think whatever we want, that means we can still freely think this stuff that's sick. And when you really begin to see that, you're going to start to see that you don't have the impulse to do it because you're not creating impulsive behavior, you're not creating reactive behavior, you're not creating compulsive behavior. But it's the things we don't think we're thinking that tend to really plague us because we've been thinking about our thinking as only those things that we have voices to and stories attached to and narratives, all that kind of stuff. Stories are narratives, but we're developing this narrative to justify those things as being real. And then each one of those things has a voice attached to it because there's a voice telling that story. Every one of the characters we create, every one of the participants is all telling a story, the same way we think about the relations we have to other people and hear in our own brain a conversation with them going on, the one we wish we'd had but never seem to have, or the one we wish we hadn't had but never really came to terms with. All those voices and stuff are based on this narrative we're trying. All the voices in our head are coming from that narrative we're trying to develop to finally prove it's true. But even in playwrights and screenplays, there's an end to the movie, to the play. If an actor went to work in the theater and thought he was going to die because the play was over, he'd stay on the stage and keep acting. That's what we're doing mentally. So it isn't true, but it's certainly something we can do. And to think of it as truth is the beginning of the insanity, because we think of it as true, we think of it as real, we think it is the only right thing we can do, so we keep doing it over and over and over again. And now have learned to also feel better about it and think that that's the solution while we're maintaining the thing that's wrong at the same time. That's the whole thing about not worrying about stopping. It's starting to become aware of the fact that you're the one starting it. When you begin to notice that you're starting it with a thought, you'll begin laughing at wanting to start it rather than crying over the fact that you can't seem to stop.
Mm. Yeah, like always after these conversations. I mean,
You
first
take a
of all,
nap.
no, first of all, I feel so much confused, but I feel so much also precise, or I'm getting to learn more about, like, how much a game I'm playing with myself,
Well,
or like how.
consider the self you're playing with as a complete game. There is no self other than the idea that the thinking we do about itself becomes ourself. When I think things become what I think of them, I think then I become what I think. Isn't true. That is just,
Yeah,
you're on a playground now that isn't fun to be on. It's a horror show. It's horrifying. The amount of trauma we're creating, we don't even notice. We have become so accustomed to anxiety and stress and pressure and depression and think that it's normal and think what I need to do every day is just figure out ways to feel better about it. Our bodies naturally, I suspect, would live considerably longer. The complexity and the ability of our bodies to heal naturally, when we're not subjecting them to the stress and the undermining their ability to function, would be enormous compared to these life cycles that we now think are normal and that have actually doubled in the last 100 or 200 years.
yeah. Well,
So, another point to make, you said you feel confused. If you're starting to see what you're doing accurately, you're going to see disturbing things accurately. And when you're feeling confused about confusing thoughts, that's the right feeling. Because you're witnessing the confusing nature of the thinking you've been doing. And rather than think you're not doing it and having no perspective, you're seeing it with perspective and saying, oh, I feel confused because I'm starting to see what I'm fucking confusing.
yeah.
So what could be simpler than something that doesn't change? An absolute nature. Let's just say it's still, it's silent, absolutely never moves, never changes. It's pretty simple. Now start thinking about it and then think about what you're thinking. You're going to see that you're not thinking about it accurately because you're not thinking about it as still. You're not thinking about it as quiet. You're thinking about it as some new version you've created, and see how quickly you can leap back into that thought as being reality rather than actually just thinking about reality.
Really easily.
What's that?
Really easily. I can I can
Yeah.
I can go, like, yeah, absolutely.
So we
Um
we easily do the thing that complicates things, and yet some can't seem to do the thing that it isn't even not complicating. It's simply contemplating things accurately. And if an absolute source is absolute, that is our source. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts, no options, no other subject, no other replacements, no substitutes. That's it. Period. Now, if it isn't that way, it wouldn't offer any benefits to thinking that way because we'd be delusional and setting up this whole interdivisive inner conflict again. But that's not what people seem to receive. They seem to find peace because they realize it was never lost. They seem to find God because they realize God was never lost. And the word we use, God, has gotten such a bad reputation because it's only referring to this absolute, infinite, unlimited, omniscient, omnipotent, absolute source. That's what it's referring to. Religion talks about it in that way and then comes up with a whole list of things we have to do to get there. Not to say that shouldn't be done. That's what's happening. But when it's done, it once again gives us the impression we can't be there if we need to do something to get there. It's just another rewrapping of the whole thing. So ultimately, the nature of our existence is the nature of our existence. And it's the nature of nature, which happens to be our nature. Not greedy, not spiteful, not contemptful, not scarce, but abundant, unlimited, whole, complete, absolute in every respect.
I just have to live it.
You are.
Um,
You are. But what you're doing with it is a
that's
nightmare.
it is.
Yeah.
It's funny enough that I last time I asked you, like, I don't know what was the question. Uh who, like, it was something about like who's calling is like everybody struggles with calling or something. And I mean, like, I don't know who's not struggling with this.
Well, it's a good, we don't, I wouldn't say we have, this is wildly listened to because this is not a conversation that most people are interested in because it challenges the whole precept of what they have considered to be their life. When it isn't their life, it's their thought about their life. But even so, we've been in over 1,000 or 100 and I think 30 countries as of this morning. There's 195 countries in the world, including the Vatican and Palestine, which are statehoods but not quite countries. They fall under a little bit different category. But so there's 195. So more than half of the world has listened in some form or another, which indicates that we're talking about a human problem. We're not talking about alcohol, and we're not talking about drugs, and we're not talking about food, and we're not talking about sex and codependence and mental relationship problems and all. We're talking about all of them, every single potential inclination toward impulsivity, reactivity, and compulsivity, all of them, because they're all byproducts of this disenfranchised thought process. This idea that everything becomes what we think of it. So one other thing to mention, Paul, because you and I can laugh about this when we talk about it, but it doesn't feel that funny when you're alone, does it?
I can I made myself alone like not too long ago, you know.
Yeah,
I can make myself alone anytime, and
yeah.
I think because I think I'm alone.
Well, how do you feel when you're alone like that?
Oh yeah, I just there's no choice. It's a choiceless.
You
Like,
think it is.
I think it is, and it's yeah, it feels like hopeless, and it feels like
Good.
I'm doomed.
Okay. So let's take those two words and apply them to what we just talked about. So if what you're thinking is hopeless and you're seeing it as hopeless, you're actually seeing it correctly, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're feeling hopeless. You're seeing it correctly. But what are you thinking about it? Something to get away from, right?
Oh yeah.
Something to stop.
And
So what you're trying to do is lie about it rather than say, oh, when I think about that hopelessness in relation to a hopeless thought, this is actually accurate. This is actually what we call true. This is not a lie. This is me saying, when I see a disturbance and am disturbed, I know I'm thinking about it accurately. And that becomes what happens is I used to see everything else as the problem. And when I started to see my problem, I started to see the disturbances out there as something with compassion rather than spite, pity, and contempt. And I don't see it all that way. I still have spite, pity, and contempt for things. I'm doing my best to grow and evaporate and dissolve those things that I tend to lean into. But it hasn't happened in that way. But the fact that I can see that and recognize that for any amount of time it takes reminds me that I don't need to take time at all to do it. But the time is an identification of my own denial, my own refusal, my own ignorance, my own unwillingness, my own lack of interest. It's all telling me this seeming subconscious that I call subconscious isn't subconscious because I'm being motivated by it all the time and I'm watching those motivations and then acting because I think it's subconscious that I have nothing to do with it. It's just another layer and another level of the whole thing. You were talking about layers earlier before we got on the recording. And I said that there are no layers in an absolute state because there are no divisions, there are no parts, there are no pieces. It's something that is almost incomprehensible to our thinking, our analytical thinking that's based on relative forms and decisions and all that kind of stuff that we do as humans. But the fact is, we don't have to think about it to know it. That's the beauty. If our thinking has no impact on it whatsoever, we don't need to think about it to know it. And to start thinking about that is to start witnessing the awe, the splendor, the fascination, the interest and curiosity of everything and saying, wow, there is a lot happening that I normally don't even pay attention to while I'm feeling doomed about the attention I'm paying. Because I'm moving from this absolute inspired state to a desperate state by choosing ideas to focus on as though they are my reality, rather than they're simply ideas and thoughts I have about reality that probably aren't true if I'm struggling with them. Or I'm intent on doing something that I just don't quite understand how to do, just like you described, you didn't have words for the things in the beginning to try to do something like Orville and Wilbur did when they decided they could fly. Not many people believed in what they were doing. They thought they were crazy. They knew it could happen. They watched birds. They saw other things fly. They knew it was possible. So their little incremental movement gave them confidence because it moved in a direction of flying rather than a direction of being buried alive in the earth, like you were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
So if the hopelessness is coming from hopeless ideas and you begin to simply assign the feelings you're having largely to the thoughts you're having, especially when they're obsessive, because those thoughts are desperate. And desperation tends to get our attention because we have an emergency alert system called instincts in our system. And anything that causes desperation is something to pay attention to. But if the attention we pay is to try to figure out how to get rid of it and pretend we're not doing it, all we're doing is asking it to get worse. And that's what the addiction is.
Hmm.
Same with drinking. If I think more drinking in a certain way, a certain time, a certain this, that, and the other thing is going to help while I continue to drink, I'm going to learn it doesn't. So the doom is the doom of the thought. You feel doomed because you're relying on thoughts as reality that are doomed. So you feel doomed. The fact is, you're not doomed. I'm not doomed. None of us are doomed. If we have an infinite source, there is no beginning or end to it. So what are we doing? What's the doom? There is none. But we can think there is because we're thinking of our thinking as reality. Once again, if you assign those feelings you have, when you identify them, you did a good job of identifying them as what you're thinking. Your feelings are feeling what you're thinking largely. They're also sensing all the things you're sensing are giving to your feelings. But because there's no conflict in those things you're sensing, the only conflict's coming from the mentality you're doing about what you're feeling. If you thought you weren't feeling a hot pan when you picked up a hot pan, you would burn until you realized, oh, I'm picking up a hot pan. We're not in conflicts with our sensory information. We're in conflict with what we're thinking about. And my sense is we're not in conflict with our thinking. We're in conflict with what we're thinking about our thinking. And when our thinking is based in reality and we think reality is only what we're thinking, to think of something absolute seems absurd. It seems insane to that kind of thinking because this only sanity becomes insanity and division and conflict and anguish and anxiety and stress. Think about how committed we are to thinking disease is normal while healing is a miracle. It is not. It's never been. Our bodies are designed to heal, they're designed to maintain balance. Every organism has that basic structure. And when they are no longer helpful to all organisms, they disappear.
Mm.
And we have actually helped organisms disappear that would have done just fine without us because of the things we've inflicted, the toxins, the poisons, all that kind of stuff that we even debate today that we may or may not have had anything to do with. How could we be here this long and have nothing to do with what we've done? And it's a large public debate. I mean, I'm not saying we had everything to do with it. I'm saying we had everything to do with what we did. Whatever it was, whatever happened, we had everything to do with. Just as you and I sitting here right now have everything to do with what we're thinking, and as a result, what we're saying. So I really appreciate you, Paul. And I know that you have come and gone in this conversation at times. I know that when you go away, you're probably licking some wounds and trying to figure it out and feeling a little overwhelmed, trying to figure it out. But I also know that in those times, while I don't think you said it, that depression and a sense of loneliness and often suicidal thoughts occur that are very hard to mention to people because it seems so out of sync with our character and so unworthy of ever mentioning. And yet, all we're really mentioning is that we're having sick thoughts that are depressing and that are not worth having. We're not thinking about suicide in terms of killing ourselves until we make believe it's those thoughts become us. We're trying to extinguish the thoughts and make believe the only way to do that is to extinguish our ability to think. That's not the goal here. The goal is to think rationally and reasonably and logically. That's the power. The book, even the 12 or the big book, even says it on the top of 50, page 53, that it's we're talking about powerless, and yet Bill says this is our power. The ability to reason is our power. The ability to think logically is our power. That's what we've been given. It's a spectacular achievement we have, and yet we've turned this asset into a liability simply because we make believe what we think is true, real, and then right. And that righteousness is never right. Whenever I feel righteous, I'm never right. I'm always nursing some wrong that I don't want to admit is my thinking about what happened, not the person involved that I'm thinking about or the situation that I'm involved that I'm thinking about.
Mm.
Love you, brother.
I love you too.
So let's
Thanks.
continue.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for yours, always. And everyone out there, remember, you're welcome to text. There's a link in every episode. We can communicate. It doesn't have to be public and it doesn't have to be recorded. You can say hello. You could anything, ask a question. Any amount of effort confirms your interest. And you will notice how activity in a direction that's constructive reinforces the constructive effort rather than the story being reinforced of there's nothing I can do and I have to sit alone and continue to nurse these thoughts until I finally straighten them out. When you're basing your thinking on the thinking you're doing that's sick, you're going to create more sick thinking. That's exactly what obsessive thinking is. It's exactly what emotional sobriety in its term is talking about, not overcoming, but replacing, because it's actually sane to be emotionally sober. Spiritual malady is not about the malady of the spirit, it's about how we think of spirit. And if the essence of life is invisible, we've called that spiritual because we can't see it. And yet we can't see ghosts either, and we've imagined them to be haunting and hateful and spiteful creatures. And yet we believe in them and don't seem to have much faith in this other spiritual aspect. Most of what is happening in our universe is invisible. The vast majority of what is happening is invisible. And we rely on it every day and then act as though it has nothing to do with us. That's a little bit comical if you're not in the drama of maintaining it. Here on campus.
Mm. All right. Well, I love you. Have a great day.
Love you too, brother.
Bye bye.
Ciao.